6.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Kiwi.
Well, the H5N1 flu virus is still hanging around, and of course at the same time you've also got the seasonal flu that normally rears its head throughout the New Zealand winter as well. Well, some scientists at Environmental Science and Research New Zealand have been looking at whether or not you can catch both at the same time, and if you did, well, what actually happens? Dr. Matthew Peacey is the lead author of a paper on this one, and he joins us on the line this morning. Hello to you, Matthew.
Good morning.
Can you catch the seasonal flu and H5N1 at the same time?
First, a little bit of a correction. It's not H5N1, so both of them are actually H1N1. So the H5N1 is more commonly known as bird flu, which we definitely don't have in New Zealand. So, yes, you can catch the pandemic and the seasonal H1N1 at the same time.
And what do those patients, and has anyone died from catching both at the same time?
No, so we only found 11. So out of the thousands of samples that we tested, we only found 11 which had this co-infection. And from this very small sample, none of them had severe flu, none of them died, none of them were hospitalised. But it is quite difficult to tell exactly what would happen in such a small group. Like, it's very difficult to take generalisations from that small group.
I would imagine if you did catch both at the same time, you'd feel pretty rotten.
Yes, well, we did have a look at, we went back and had a look at exactly what their symptoms were, and these range from very mild to sort of general flu. So it didn't actually seem, as far as we could tell, that it actually made the actual individual any worse off.
Okay, so when you have the two viruses in your body at the same time, what are they doing? Are they trying to compete against each other?
I think it's more just a chance sort of thing. So we found that all 11 of these occurred within a 16-day period, and that coincided exactly with when there were roughly even numbers of these two strains in the community. And what we do know with influenza in general is that when two different strains infect the same cell, they can actually mix their genes. So they can end up swapping some of their genetic characteristics between the strains.
So rather than battle it out, they can almost coexist.
Yeah, so you can. There is potential to get a new strain. So you put two strains into one cell and there's a potential to get a third, a new one, popping out. So we didn't actually find that. We didn't find any of these reassortants actually carrying on within the community at all. But we did find with these co-infections, and we know that there is the possibility for that to happen.
Are there other examples in nature where two viruses have got together and made something completely different?
Well, yes, like the pandemic strain itself. It was originally known as swine flu, and one of the reasons for this was it was thought that viruses had basically got together within the pigs and almost as a mixing vessel. And this is how the pandemic strain actually came about. So it was swapped genes between human viruses, swine viruses, and avian viruses, all flu viruses. And then this new one popped out, which the human population hadn't seen, so wasn't immune to, and therefore it spread like wildfire around the world.
So if you did see an example of this eventually, the seasonal flu and the H1N1 combining, would you think that it would be a super bug of sorts, a super virus?
No. It depends. I mean, what we don't know is we don't know exactly what would pop out because there's many different combinations, there's many different possibilities, and we don't actually know whether you mix a few of these genes, what the actual characteristics of this virus would actually have. So that's one of the things that we're looking into now. The worry that, well, the reason that we're monitoring this now is because the seasonal flu is resistant to Tamiflu. The pandemic flu is not. So there is the potential to basically pass that characteristic, so that Tamiflu resistance, onto the pandemic strain. So that would be one of the more obvious sort of ones that possibly could happen. Now, we didn't see that, but there is potential again.
I mean, do you look at the various viruses and then rank them in how powerful they are? Because of the fact that the seasonal flu is resistant to Tamiflu would tell me, without this scientific knowledge, that, well, it must be more powerful.
It depends what you're talking about powerful. I mean, really the only thing that tells you is it's resistant to Tamiflu. So if you're taking Tamiflu, it's going to be ineffective against it. But it doesn't. That's one sort of separate characteristic. It doesn't have all these other characteristics necessarily, like transmissibility or, I guess, general virulence, or how sick it actually makes you.
Yeah. Are there instances where viruses can combine and the combined or mutated virus is actually not as virulent, not as powerful, not as contagious as the two previous?
Yes. I'd say within the body, if you've got these two flus, most of these flus, when they actually mix and pop one out, it will actually be a less strong virus because a lot of these ones, say the pandemic strain, it's probably mixed many, many times, and it's only when it's found this optimal combination that it's actually been fit enough to take over. So at the start of last year, we saw that our seasonal flu was very quickly taken over by the pandemic flu, and that was because it had characteristics which basically outcompeted the other flu. So, I mean, it's very difficult to tell exactly what would happen, but most of the combinations we'd never actually see because they'd never actually survive long enough for them to actually pop up into the general population.
Yeah. And where does the ESR's research sit in the context of the wider world's research in this?
Well, this is the first time, as far as we know, that people have found the co-infection between these two particular strains. So we do know previously that humans can get two different strains at one time.
Yeah.
So we do know that's happened. There hasn't been very much research done on any of this at all, and we actually stumbled across this almost by accident because we were looking at Tamiflu resistance, and we found that with some of these viruses, they had sort of an intermediate profile, so they were sort of resistant. And when we looked at these closer, it wasn't that they were sort of resistant or not, it was the fact that we had one resistant virus in the same person as a susceptible virus, so therefore gave this sort of mixture.
So but besides the fact that, I mean, this could potentially be dangerous, is it quite exciting?
Yeah, it's very exciting for us. I mean, probably not for many people in the general public, but when you work with this sort of stuff all the time, it was quite exciting to sort of see this and see that it all happened within the 16-day period when there was the co-circulation of these two flus.
Well, thank you, Dr. Matthew Peacey, for telling us all about it.
Thank you.
That is Dr. Matthew Peacey from ESR, Environmental Science and Research, looking at the combination of, I got it wrong, I said H5N1 before, it's H1N1 and the seasonal flu.